Hello, this is It Takes Two, myself, Hugh, and this week I'm joined by a special guest, Leonora Bennet, my colleague in the mental health field, who's a specialist in recovery work and mindfulness, particularly helping people deal with some of the strains and stresses of modern life, and in particular anxiety of all things. So I want to welcome you to the It Takes Two set, Leonora.
Hello, Hugh. It's nice to be here. Hi.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. And thanks for making the time so we could have this conversation about, such an important topic to do with narcissism and online dating and anything to do with, I think, relationships and moving towards marriage is so important. And they offer, so hopefully we can have a conversation that bears some fruit that people can find a benefit. So just wanted to make the best use of time, really, and jump straight into the actual topic of narcissism. Narcissistic personality disorder. This person's a narcissist. He's a narcissist. She's a narcissist. This has come up. This was this kind of language was something that we only heard, from people, clinicians, and kind of like talking from, counseling, psychotherapy point of view, mental health point of view. But it's become such popular speak in the last few years. I'd be interested to find out some of your thoughts about why do you think that is? Why does this kind of become, why is it a popular conversation or popular speak in terms of the terminology?
I think with the rise of internet dating, different forms of communication, different forms of people meeting each other online, and also the rise of pseudo-psychology vernacular coming into the mainstream, and we're quite curious about certain things that certain stories have arisen about women or men who've been completely taken unawares by unsuspecting partners that have done a number on them. And this kind of disastrous relationship has kind of become the character of their partner has been held up to light. And certain traits they've seen in this psychological disorder, they're projecting onto that person. So I'm not saying it's necessarily untrue, but people are kind of more aware of, narcissistic personality disorder, that my ex-boyfriend had that, that girl had that, they did that to me. So yeah, some of it's a projection actually from unhappy relationships, and others are maybe realistic characteristics that people are portraying now due to different types of dating.
Oh, okay, interesting. When you said some of the things you said got my brain thinking because, oftentimes when people are in committed relationships that are headed towards marriage, or people are married, for example, whether they've been in long-term relationships or short-term, but they were high expectations, and then for one reason or another, people couldn't broker a deal and go any further, and so the relationship ended. It can be quite difficult. It can be quite emotionally taxing. And but I'm quite aware as human beings that sometimes there's almost like that disappointment needs to be couched in there was a victim. Because when you were speaking, I was thinking of a kind of a Hollywood script of the perfect man or these kind of movies. But when there's somebody who's they've got these traits, and I wonder how much that is real, or the need to create a victim and a villain in terms of relationships not working out. What's your thoughts about that?
I believe some of that's true. When someone's broken-hearted, it's hard to resolve that pain sometimes, and rather than looking at maybe what you did to impact or to make the outcome happen, you may also just completely blame someone else. So I think it's a mixture of those factors. But also, I do think modern dating is just a veritable minefield when it comes to the ability for somebody to lie, be dishonest, misrepresent themselves as a narcissist would. It's the perfect breeding ground for that. So a certain level of discernment is needed by all people dating online before they open themselves up to this potential vulnerability, and it's a very difficult area in which to protect yourself from that unless you're psychic. And sometimes people get they get hurt, they get ghosted, they get lied to, they find out their perfect partner has a wife and 3 kids. They find out that the chick they're checking out online has got, 3 baby daddies, and she basically only wanted the money. So it's discernment that's needed, and discernment is difficult when you're dating online, and you actually could be dating a complete stranger who presents himself as a saint, and that's on you. That's on you to do that work.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know if there's anybody that is a saint apart from maybe the actual saints that exist in history, right? But I don't know if am I being cavalier in my conversation, but I'm still thinking, are we just pathologizing? Is it just a new language to pathologize things that we don't like? Or hoping that we can maybe look at some specific traits or what they call warning signs or this is popular speak now. Red flag and red flag. We like this kind of talk. But before we go there, I want to go somewhere really sensitive in terms of gender. I know that gender is something that we don't speak about much in polite society anymore, at least in the public, the politically correct arena of male and female difference. We're almost kind of like, there's been some public speakers that have been chastised for talking about the differences between men and women, because there's a kind of ideology of pretty much the same, right? Apart from a few biological, anatomical differences with men and women are pretty the same. You want to be an astronaut, I want to be an astronaut, why not? Why not? It's fine. So there is that kind of ideology outside of the room, but I want to go there tonight. I want to go there. Do you believe, even if it's anecdotally, whether it's research-based, whether it's whatever it is, but in your kind of like look at the situation, because I know women get together and they speak, is there one gender that is prone or is displayed, you would say there's a kind of an imbalance, that the one gender over the other has shown traits of narcissism?
I don't know. I hate to generalize, but I do believe evidence shows that men show evidence of less conscientiousness. So men are less likely to think of other people in the workplace and generally be less empathic. But I begrudge to say that men are more likely to be narcissistic, but I believe it's easier for them because of their socialization, maybe certain biological factors. Even saying that makes me feel a bit, but I do believe men are slightly more likely to be narcissistic, more selfish, less empathic, and that may be just societal conditioning.
There is psychological research to say that, generally speaking, men are more interested in things. There's a lot of psychological research on this out there, actually. Men are interested in things, and women tend to be interested in people. So for women, generally speaking, relationships seem to be it's more about the relationship. Whereas for men, maybe it's more about the task, or men are kind of goal orientated as opposed to relationship. They're destination orientated. I'm putting it in a crude way, but almost like men are more interested generally at arriving at a particular goal, a particular destination, whereas women maybe the process shows the quality of the relationship, the quality of connection, the quality of understanding, and all these things that relate to kind of psychological intimacy of men being goal driven. Just that bit different. Do you think that plays a role, or does that? I mean, that is science based, but that doesn't automatically mean that men are more prone to be narcissists. But I wonder how it plays out in your opinion. What's the word on the wire when it comes to girlfriend?
Anecdotally, the clients I've worked with that are recovering from narcissistic relationships are women, but that may just be the women. The group of people that are most open about it, most likely to speak about it. Men may not express, if they've been through a traumatic, abusive relationship with a woman that used them and destroyed them, they may not be so open about it. So I've worked with women who are in recovery from that. But as you said, it may not be that clear cut. I think it's acceptable for men to be narcissistic because of certain patriarchal values that are adhered to. So it's okay for them to be more selfish. It's okay for them to be womanizers. It's okay maybe for them to get away with using someone for sex or money. It's frowned upon, but generally we expect that from men, which isn't cool, but we do. So society's like, oh, well, you know what I mean? He's a bit of a player, a bit of a cad. When a woman does it, I don't know. It's worse, but it's more secretive as well. And somebody won't say, she took me for everything. She destroyed me. You know, she beat me up.
That opens up a certain aspect of the conversation about men and vulnerability. And in terms of at least socialization, are men socialized into being able to be vulnerable? Because it seems like, and I'm going to say this in a kind of caricature way, but almost like the stereotype, although we are making some progress in society in terms of, you know, mental health, psychology, and men's attitude and women's attitudes and stuff like how we deal with each other. But a woman saying, you know, I was a victim of his lies, his deceit, his bullying, his whatever it was, but these different things that may comprise of him being a narcissist or just not a nice person. But I was a victim. I'm a recovering victim because that relationship took a whole load out of me. There would be more of a warm embrace from at least a peer group, possibly even professionally to say, or maybe the courage to even come forward and get professional help. Because a woman will be able to maybe more likely to hold that vulnerability and say, actually, I need to get help. This is not working for me. I'm damaged. I'm in a bad place. So there's that coming forward aspect to it. But also maybe because it's kind of symbiotic relationship, maybe she will be received more, or at least her perception is comfortable because of, you know, kind of unspoken. I'm a woman that's in distress. People will receive me. Other women will receive me, and even some professional men would be understanding and see it in that light. Whereas a man, or for men, many men, it may be a self-doubt of, was I the idiot? Was it me that was naive, second guessing themselves, or fearing that I look really stupid? I got took for a whole load of money. I paid for a whole load of stuff. She ran a whole load of, she ran game on me, to use, colloquial speak, and I'm kind of left high and dry. But I feel in a bad place. But who do I talk to about this? Because it's very embarrassing. Shame is a kind of paralyzing emotion. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think it's still hard for men. It's so hard for men to come forward and say, I am a victim of abuse. This happened to me. And it's sad that we're in that place, but it's improving. But absolutely, men don't have that space in society, and they're reluctant to seek, therapy and express that. But it's getting better. But men have got a long way to go in allowing themselves the right to express their inner pain and their inner world. And there needs to be more of a shift. There needs to be more of a change. And I see that coming, I think, with this COVID lockdown and with the increase in suicides we're going to get and the increase in depression and people speaking out about their suffering now. Probably they're going to use furlough. My husband was furloughed and had a breakdown. That's going to enable certain voices to come to the fore and men to talk about the healing that's needed, because it's so long overdue, definitely.
And you say something that, about men being allowed, or men taking that, there's a slight shift in society. And because my concern is that, being a therapist, I know that it has to come out somewhere. Right? When there's pressure, right, it has to. So when there's mental pressure, psychological pressure, mental health issues, it has to come out somewhere. And men have in the past tended to often lash out, or even that turn that aggression inward, but it came out in the form of aggression. So it would come out in anger. It may come out in self-harm and suicide may come out in substance misuse, but to self-medicate or to self-soothe, depending on your school of thought and the language you use. But this is the kind of thing this is the ways that men have dealt with things. And then there's something else that's there's a phenomenon that's emerged on the web in the era of social media that we're living in, this thing called, some sound healthy, like when it's sort of about the manosphere or men talking about men's issues, but there's which sounds totally in order, and men should be allowed to explore their issues as men, but there's a dark element, which is different from the manosphere, but this incel type movement, or even more extreme versions of incel, this involuntary celibate men, and this kind of hostility towards women and the female form, or females, or this kind of resentment. So it's quite concerning if we don't develop healthy spaces for our young men, for our sons, and for young, the next generation. We don't start to develop that for those, young men to be able to express these things in a healthy way and not be shot down as toxic masculinity. That's the dark side. Is what's waiting if their voices are not heard in the mainstream, or not valued in kind of like mainstream society in terms of vulnerability.
Yeah, like that subversion of the shadow side being expressed in another way, in a hostile way, rather than healing. That is definitely what we're seeing online. Whole platforms of men saying, she did this, she did that, blah, blah, rather than, I was hurt, how can I change that? How can I become better? They want to project their issues onto the opposite sex in quite a negative way. And that doesn't result in anybody winning, because it just results in huge blocks in communication and animosity and polarization. And that's kind of where we are. Yeah.
It's really dangerous as well. And it doesn't, what it is as well? It doesn't get results. Because say, for example, there are men that are resentful because they may have been rejected in terms of romantic advances with women. And if the projection is she's an evil cow, or she's an X, Y, or Z, but some sort of expletive, and it's what women are like and things of that nature, it doesn't really give the young man, or whatever age he's actually, but it doesn't give that person a chance to kind of like introspect and think, actually, are my soft skills or my communication skills up to speed? Is it something about the way I'm presenting myself? Is there something that I can, I can't change who I am, but is there anything that I can develop that would improve my chances of finding a healthy relationship that could lead to, like a long-term marriage, or, something of substance, if that's what you're looking for, as opposed to naming and shaming or blaming. And I guess there is a female version of that as well, in the sense where toxic, everything that we do, is toxic something specific, or is it something that we just don't like? Is it anything that we don't like about men as women? For example, we just label it toxic, and that makes it, it's obviously wrong because he's male and he's toxic. So we're living in a very interesting time.
And when you label something, you make it separate from you. You're not taking responsibility for what you didn't see, or you're even kind of not looking at it. It's easy to label something and say, okay, yeah, that was that, rather than actually, what was that, and what part did you play in that? And it's okay to label stuff, but where are you in that? So yeah, it's more about looking at something for what it is, rather than separating it and saying it's nothing to do with me. I'm not to blame. It's your fault. Yeah,
it's kind of simplistic and polarizing. So the era that we're living in right now, not all, but some of the conversation is based on, all women are this, therefore I don't need to introspect and change or shift, or there's no reflection or no room for growth. But vice versa, on the other side, all men are toxic, or women are X, Y, and Z, and so there's no critique or no self-criticism and self-development that's possible, because uses to like end of history, like we're fully evolved or something, or fully developed, so there's nowhere to go, because it's all their fault. It went wrong, so obviously it's their fault. I was a victim of him. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. What about the idea then that women are more advanced, or the women's movement's more advanced, in the sense of, you've got feminism, there's this argument, coming out of America, that there's women have developed feminism, so there's a language to express issues related to gender inequalities or things that are specific to women in their journey and their development on a kind of socio-political level. But for men, there isn't even that language. I mean, we hear words like the manosphere, but they're kind of new words, and there isn't all that body of research, speakers and academics and stuff like that. And so that's part of it, in a sense, where the argument is, should I say that, so it's difficult for some men to kind of own their masculinity and bring in the vulnerability and issues that what it's like for men, because we live in a patriarchy. But yeah, wealth, a certain amount of wealth is owned or in the hands of a small minority of men. But when it comes to suicide rates, imprisonment rates, who dies in war, victims of violent crime, even sexual violent crime, a lot of those victims, apart from sexual violent crime, men form the majority. So what say you?
I do believe women have a language. We created this language through fighting for certain parts of independence and fighting for recognition in the workplace and in gender politics. We do have a language that serves us well in expressing our pain, our vulnerability, and we're also better communicators. We have that language. And men, they're trying. They've come to this place of, yes, they're starting to express, starting to find these spaces for themselves, but it's so much more of a struggle. And I do agree that men hide their pain, hide their vulnerability, and this is partially because the patriarchy they created themselves doesn't enable them to speak out. So you can't have a patriarchy, which is a system of male-dominated power, physicality, and repression of emotions, leading through physical example and leaving the emotions to the girls. You can't have that system and actually enable young men in a world where sexual politics is changing and even gender politics is changing, and kind of the language is changing and things are becoming more fluid and challenging.
The landscape's different, man, from when
you can't have
10, 20 years ago, not just when I was a child.
Confused, or in a confusing landscape, where to express their pain. Who are they? What does a man look like now? And what does a female want from a man? And I don't know, man. So yeah, men don't have that language, but it's coming, it's there. And as long as it doesn't subvert into a negative place, it's coming. And they need it. Men need it. With suicide rates, with what's coming out of this COVID, this isolation of young men, they need that language. They need it. And it's on the tip of their tongue. It's coming. But how many men will suffer in the meantime because they've silenced themselves?
Both. So it sounds like you're saying that there's both. There's an element where, as a society, so we put ourselves in the mix as we, as a society, just members of society, or we as professionals in the professional field of mental health and psychology need to be more aware, more, switched on in terms of opening, welcoming pathways that where men can feel empowered to come forward and seek out help. But also there is a responsibility on men as individuals, to say it's okay to be aware, it's okay not to be okay, and that weakness and vulnerability are two different things. Like, weakness is weak as an inability to do something, and vulnerability is more about vulnerability is a strength, because it means, like, say for example, I know I'm not physically well, so it makes sense for me to make an appointment with the GP or go to the hospital, as opposed to I'm not well but I'm going to play like I'm not well, because that's a sign of strength. Actually, it's the reverse. That's kind of a sign of weakness. So individuals need to also own their vulnerabilities, acknowledge them, and really take that into account.
Does modern society need warriors? Do we need warriors anymore? A warrior licks his wounds, goes back, he might stitch himself up, and he's back out there, hiding. Do we need warriors anymore? Or do we need sages? Do we need people to be more wise and more open about how they feel? And do we need warriors anymore? I'm not saying we don't need strong men, but the type of men that this society needs is changing. And we need to raise our boys. We need to allow our boys, our men, a space to just be more than warriors. We put the warriors aside for now. Like, be yourself, be a sage.
I think there's a lot. There is a lot of pressure. Obviously, working in circles to deal, in psychological circles and workshops and programs dealing with young men. It can be really tough in terms of identity. In terms of for I'm going to keep it simplistic and almost talk about just keep it to heterosexual men, right? And just to keep simplified discussion. In terms of identity, in terms of, as you said, what a woman wants, because almost masculinity and femininity are they're so intertwined, and the male is a mirror image of the male, like the yin and the yang. So it's quite interesting in terms of how do men respond. Do they want to be seen as a barbarian, or a dinosaur, or is it that there still is a need for alpha male, and that women ultimately are genetically encoded to respond to alpha men and to respond to strong men? So as much as political correctness has some power in terms of men who access women or have more, a greater reach in terms of dating and marriage and mating, are like men who are confident, who are high earners, things like this. Because women are hypergamous. With all the feminism in the world, women still marry. They're equal at best. A wealthy woman will marry a wealthy man, or she'll marry somebody who's more wealthy than her. But women don't marry down. But wealthy men, they by many, most of the time they marry down. So there's that going on. I remember listening to an interesting conversation online. There's a woman's show which I'll choose not to mention at this point in time. But there's a discussion, and they're talking about men and vulnerabilities, and I think they cited some pop star saying that, I need my man to open up and cry, and to feel that he can show his softer side or whatever it is. Trust me. But if he's crying because his ex has died, then he needed a new girlfriend. So I thought that was interesting. Like, almost like it can be vulnerable, but is it vulnerable on command? Is it vulnerable for me to, like, I set the litmus test for when you'll be vulnerable, how will you be vulnerable, and to whom, and related to what? It's quite interesting. But it was just a bit of food for thought. But I want to ask you another question, or bring up another talking point around the online dating aspect of things. How has that changed the game, whether related to narcissism or just changed the game full stop?
It's made it easier because there's a lot of wolves out there in sheep's clothing. So man's profile showing he's like I said earlier, a saint, or he's a decent guy, he's upstanding, and all it's allowing for a lot of shadiness. You can hide who you
Isn't that everybody though? Isn't that being like, you can take pictures to the side and stuff like that, look to the side, like the side angle. I got a friend who uses dating sites, and he says, I'm tuned to it now. I can see who you only uses headshots, they won't show the body. You know what I mean? Show the body, like, so there's all kind of catfishing and chicanery going on, I guess.
It's not just the physical attributes, of course. We've all used these filters, trust me, they come in handy, yeah? But you can hide your motivation, your character, you can hide your marital status, you can hide your bag of picnic them. Sorry. You can hide how many children.
That means you're many children.
You can hide so much. You can hide the fact that you're chatting, well, maybe not, but on some websites you can see who's online. So you can you hide the fact you're chatting to 8 gal them. 8 women, sorry. You can hide so much. You can hide. Yeah, and it's very beneficial for somebody of maybe a dubious nature, or someone that maybe is a sex addict. I have to say this. Men that are opportunists, are seeking women purely for physical gratification, which is cool. If you're about that, that's fine. But if you're looking for a relationship and then you happen to, after a few dates or lots of dates, to succumb to somebody who you think is a lovely man, and then you find out he's seeing 5 other women and stuff, and then, yeah, I think it's a minefield. Also, it allows for certain behaviours that are quite harmful to people. So ghosting, which is kind of new, but can cause a lot of damage to people's confidence, and quite destructive. So on both sides, men and women are playing games, and the internet allows for the player mentality.
I'd say there's an advantage for men on one level. I mean, obviously, both genders both sexes will find that there's pros and cons. But I know that one thing that will be beneficial to men is that generally in society, men, regardless of ethnicity and culture and like, right, generally men are expected to initiate. Not that it happens always and all the time, but maybe they get what they perceive as a signal or the come on sign, for want of a better term, and it might like lead a man to pursue. But generally men see being visual beings, and they make their move, right? And that, but with that takes courage, and with that takes rejection, getting blown out the water, right? And when that's public, that can be quite taking an L publicly can be quite, you know what I mean? Like, it can be quite bruising to the male ego. However, when it's, the argument is that when it's just basically whatever, you know, like it's just a swiping thing. Yeah. I mean, rejection's kind of like get over that in seconds, really.
Yeah, rejection's cool, but ghosting, like when you can date someone. Yeah, when you date someone.
Remind me of what ghosting is. These are new words that are into the regular lexicon, the regular vocab.
This is someone you've probably had physical interaction with, you've actually been dating and getting to know on a physical level, so you've seen them in the flesh, not just online yet.
Okay.
You've seen them have a relationship, and sometimes it's a substantial amount of time. It's not just a few months. It could be like a couple of years. So you end up, all right, maybe not that long. Okay, a year. So you may be dating someone for a year, or and then they will ghost you. So all sign of them will be gone online.
So is that blocked on all social media and blocked on the phone or whatever?
Gone, man.
The person that you used to date is no longer available. Don't call this number.
It's out of
automated voicemail or whatever it is, or
it may be out of the blue, or after an argument we thought that was not a good argument, but you would not have expected somebody you trusted and knew quite well to disappear on you. That happens. Like, that happens now. And it probably never used
to leave the person that's on the receiving end in kind of like a psychological, just a limbo and a self-doubt and what you know, they internalize.
Yeah.
You know, is it something about them? What have they done wrong? As opposed to, it could be, you don't know, human imagination, right? We're wired to kind of like seek out danger, so people might internalize it that it's something I've done. You know, take it in a negative way.
And not having closure can be quite...
Yeah, because it's jagged, isn't it? It's a brutal ending. It's not a closure. It's not that conversation in a coffee shop as they walk away in their own directions, or, you know, how people finish over the phone. Right? But it's just it kind of feels a little bit brutal.
But ghosting is a telltale kind of tactic of a narcissist as well. A narcissist.
Can we look at some of the red flags?
Absolutely.
Let's discuss some of the red flags.
Love bombing.
What's that?
Love bombing is the initial stage where somebody will shower you with attention, affection, love. They'll take you out everywhere and be like, oh, it's amazing, it's my soulmate, the best man I've ever met, the best woman, she loved me. So this intense foray of attention.
Okay.
Red flag.
And then, yeah. Also, wait, no, but I mean, some people, isn't that how they might genuinely feel? Like they met somebody that could be the woman of their dreams or the man of their dreams, so they feel that intense euphoria. People who are in love do release the same chemicals as somebody that's on what they call opiates, right? The body releases the same your body releases the same hormones and neurological chemicals, right, as when you are high on cocaine.
Absolutely. It's addictive, it's euphoric. But a narcissist cannot maintain this. So after the initial stage, for some narcissists...
So for the narcissist, it's cultivated, as opposed to being a general euphoria. I have to show these feelings because I feel overwhelmed. You're saying the narcissist is more calculated.
It's an MO. It's an MO.
Modus operandi, way of operating, yeah? Cool.
It's standard practice because they know what works. So
what's next on the narcissistic shopping list? I notice I have to restrain myself from saying he this and he that, he or she maybe
they. I
will restrain myself today. What else is on the shopping list? What else are some of the telltale signs that people need to be aware of?
So the hot and cold. So the love bombing is lovely, it's fine, and for a normal relationship that dies down gradually. You get to know each other. You're still seeing each other after 4 or 5 months, but a narcissist will maintain the love bombing. It'll be quite intense, maybe for a shorter period, so like 2 months, 6 weeks, and then comes the switch. This is the red flag now. They cannot maintain that intensity of communication, interaction, so they might stop calling you. They will stop calling you. They won't respond to texts. They'll read your text, leave it on read. So this intensity will just fall off suddenly. You'll be like, damn, what's going on? Man hasn't called me tonight, or he said he'd ring me and he hasn't called me. I'm sorry to use the male.
Go for it.
So this hot and cold, and it'll be like, oh no, I'm just busy, it's fine, I'm going to call you. So communication dwindles and gets much lesser.
That sounds like setting up an addict. That sounds like setting up an addict, almost like the person's been playing. The person's been playing with the cocaine. God forbid. The person's been playing with this intoxicant, which is their personality, and then now I'm gonna hold out on a chick to get her clocking like she needs to.
A trauma bond. It's called trauma bonding.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
The woman or the other partner is left going, what? Why are they not calling? Why are they not? I haven't seen them for 3 weeks. He says everything.
I like that term actually, trauma bond.
No, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Addictive pattern, and it's quite destructive. So the other partner is flailing for attention. What's wrong? You haven't
looking for answers. They're looking for answers. What have I done wrong? Yeah.
What? Baby, it's good. It's all good. I love you. So hot and cold, sporadic attention, usually culminating in physical. So they'll come back, see you, and you think you have a relationship because of the time you've invested, but they're just knocking the boots and leaving.
This kind of mimics a little bit of sometimes the relationships with domestic violence, where the victim, the perpetrator, can be super nice, right, and make that person feel held, loved, valued, worth, immensely in their life, right? And then there's those acts of abuse, whether they're physical abuse or other kinds of abuse. So this kind of hot and cold. So it's harder for the person to break free because they're hoping that that real person is the loving, caring, nurturing person that makes them feel valued. Not that they're an actual abusive person. The dark side, the shadow, is the real self, and that loving person is the act.
Absolutely.
And all right, so let's go through a few more. A few more signs after.
It's called the devaluing stage. But a narcissist will use terminology or use phrases that will undermine your confidence. They'll say, "Oh, that looks good on you, but you could maybe wear this," or "Oh, are you doing that? You're doing that for work, or you could try this." So it's not just the hot and cold; it's the dismantling or the.
I don't know if this is. I don't. An example of this, but I don't know if this is more for an episode on colorism and attraction. But it's something like, you're really pretty for a dark skinned girl.
God, let's not go there right now.
well, that's another episode, because we will go there.
Yeah.
We will go there.
Somebody will be like, oh, you look good.
No stone unturned.
You should try this.
It takes two.
But, so there's a hint of someone trying to dismantle your esteem, tear apart your identity, all while saying they love you or care for you, but actually showing the opposite. So they're devaluing you. And if you allow that hot and cold to that person to come and go, it's so destructive. But by then, you're hooked. You are hooked on this person. And then from this, sometimes usually there's triangulation. This is where a narcissist or the person that is of doubtful character will act like they're busy with other people. So they'll bring someone else into the mix. Oh, I can't do this. There's always a third party, either like, I'm kind of busy now, like I've got to be here, and he'll start mentioning possibly another female's name, and you'll be like, who's Janelle?
Or if it's a female narcissist or manipulator, she'll mention guys and stuff like that. You know, my ex keeps calling me or whatever.
Me and Rodney just went for a drink. Oh, I know Rodney is. You've never heard nothing about Rodney, and now Rodney is, your girl's drinking partner. So they triangulate. They bring in the next person, and you'll.
That's to create the fear. That's to create the fear, the insecurity.
Yeah. And then you'll be like, baby, and sorry, just trying to hook back even more.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't play yourself. This is when people should walk, but they don't.
It's because of the addiction. But it's like breaking an addiction. It's not easy, is it?
It's awful. It's awful. And I know people that have been married to narcissists, so they've stayed in a 20-year relationship with someone who's repeatedly kind of cheated, made promises, not fulfilled them, come back and forth. There's children involved. When the woman should have just blocked off, disappeared, like literally should have just left. But you see these traits in people: very selfish, very non-committal, claiming to love and care for you, but their behaviour is the opposite. That's in a nutshell, that's a narcissist. And sometimes they ghost. Very often they ghost. They'll just disappear, but they always come back.
They always come back. All right, interested. I'm going to throw in. I'll just throw in a couple of since we got a shopping list out, and this is just, I mean, we're enjoying this conversation, but there are obviously takeaways for people to be aware if they feel like they're in an abusive relationship. Not just when we use the word abuse, meaning violent, whether male or female, that you might be the recipient of the tactics of a narcissist. And so some things to bear in mind is that narcissists have inflated egos and a grandiose sense of importance. So, it's natural for people to believe in themselves, to be confident. In and of itself, that doesn't make them a narcissist. But when people have an inflated ego, and a grandiose sense of their own importance, that's a bit of a warning sign. Also, narcissists lack empathy, and they'll gaslight you. They'll lie to people to keep the person confused. Is it my fault? And you get people in a mind state where they doubt their own judgments. Another warning sign is that narcissists hate to be ignored themselves. Funny enough that they play the ignoring game, but they hate to be ignored, should I say. Narcissists will act needy purely just to get an emotional reaction from you. Just that's a way of sucking their partners back in. And narcissists spend their energy trying to control people, their significant other, by pushing their buttons, basically. So those are just some of the things that like the people out there in the social stratosphere to just be aware of from our conversation. Leo, it's been so much fun, and the time has just gone by so quickly. And I really have to thank you for taking the time out to have this conversation. And want to thank the viewers out there, and hope to see you next time for another installment with Takes Two. But until then, remember to stay safe.